Going to be going through our Capital One Bowl Mania predictions today, every single FBS bowl game. And just a quick disclaimer, we have tried to go through and look at all of the different players who are going to be transferring and different head coaching changes, but this stuff is constantly changing. Some of these games aren't going to happen for a couple of weeks. Lots of things could potentially change. Star quarterbacks could potentially transfer. College football has a horrible schedule right now, and they're going to need to figure out how to get that fixed. But for right now, we are going to do the best we can, and we'll start it off tonight with the bucked up LA Bowl, Boise State, and Washington. Could be a sneaky good game. The spread, I think, is around 10 points towards the Huskies. I really do like this Washington team. From everything that I've seen, they're going to have most of their guys in this game. I personally like Washington to win it.
I'm in agreement with you, Jonah. I just think Washington has shown that they are a pretty talented team this year. And Boise State, don't get me wrong, also has some talent, but this is definitely not the same Broncos team that we've seen from the last couple of years. The next game up is the IS Forest Salute to Veterans Bowl between the Troy Trojans and Jacksonville State Gamecocks. I think this is going to be another pretty interesting game between two teams that have been pretty competitive in their conferences, but I do think Troy is going to be the better team here. Maybe it's a little bit of bias because we saw them nearly take down Clemson earlier on in the season when we still had hope that Clemson might end up being a good football team, but I do think Troy's got a couple key weapons here. And yes, it is the majority pick, but I just think Troy is the better team in this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. This one could go either way. Both teams made their conference championship game. I think it'll be relatively close, but Troy arguably has faced the better competition this year, probably should be able to grind out a win. The staff DNA Cure Bowl with Old Dominion and USF. This one could have been a much better game. However, both starting quarterbacks are going to be transferring this year, which means that both teams are on to the backups. Gaston Moore for South Florida and Quinn Hyney for Old Dominion. So it's really tough to predict which one is going to do better. I think this game really could end up going either way. USF has been a really solid team all year long, so I think that it makes sense to pick them, but I don't think this should be, 92% versus 8%. It really seems like this could go either way if, Old Dominion's backup ends up having a much better game. It really is going to come down to the quarterback here, and it's just completely unpredictable.
And why it's so unpredictable too is that both quarterbacks for these teams are also the team's leading rusher. So this is like losing 90% of your offense. So this is just going to be a really tough game to predict, but we're just going to go with the slightly more talented team here, as we've kind of seen throughout the season. The 68 Ventures Bowl between Louisiana Raging Cajuns and Delaware Blue Hens in their first year at the FBS level, and they are in a bowl game. And I don't know about you, Jonah. Maybe it's a little bit of bias since I played Dynasty with them in college football, but I'm rocking with the Blue Hens here. I just something about this passing offense. I mean, their starting quarterback has thrown for 3,500 yards this season, 22 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. This is assuming he's playing. But if he is playing, I think this potent passing attack of the Blue Hens is going to be too much for this Louisiana defense to handle. I'm rocking with Blue Hens.
You see, I absolutely love that pick because I think Delaware has had a great first season in the FBS, and what better way to cap it off than with a bowl game win? I love that story. And speaking of good stories, how about the Kennesaw State Owls winning their conference and going 10-3, making it to the Myrtle Beach Bowl against the MAC champions in Western Michigan? I love this bowl matchup, pitting two group of five champions against each other. It's going to be a really fun game. And like I said with Delaware, I love the good stories. Kennesaw State going from the worst team in the FBS last year. Give me the Owls to win this game and finish with 11 wins.
I'm right there with you, Jonah. Love that pick. Next up, the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl between Memphis and NC State. I actually think this is going to be a really, really interesting game. Two high-powered offenses. And obviously, Memphis is going through a lot of changes. New head coach coming in, a lot of star players that either entering the transfer portal or expected to transfer to Memphis. But NC State with CJ Bailey this season, they have been a really competitive team, much like we expected them to be at the very beginning of the preseason. I do think that NC State, assuming that most of their starters are playing, are going to have slightly more talent compared to Memphis. I just think there's so much turnover happening for Memphis that this might be a little bit of a tough game for them to win. I'm going to go with NC State here, but I do think it's going to be a high scoring, close game between these two teams.
Yeah, you also have to think of the fact that Memphis is losing their head coach. How is that going to affect team morale? That kind of a thing. I also like the NC State pick here. Now, we are going to skip past the CFP games because we're going to do a separate video with our college football playoff predictions. And we'll do that in an actual bracket style. I just don't really like the way that Bowl Mania has this. So we're going to go ahead and skip past these four games. And we'll go ahead and put a link in the description of this video to our college football playoff predictions once those come out, either later today or tomorrow. Washington State and Utah State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, one of my favorite bowl games. Some of these have just amazing names. Personally, I'm leaning Washington State here. I think part of it's probably just the fact that I've been so used to seeing them as a Power Five program for so long, and they feel just like a slight tier above the group of five here. Utah State had an okay season. They are favored here. Washington State's been picked more, probably for the same reason that I'm thinking of picking them. But yeah, I've got the Cougars in this one.
Yeah, this is one where we're going to slightly differ. I'm personally picking Utah State, but I'm not going to argue with this one just because I do think Washington State with Zevi Eckhouse is probably still in better shape overall in terms of just pure talent. But I do think this Utah State offense can give Washington State some problems. But in terms of the defense, I don't really know. I'm not going to argue about it too much. I'm personally going with the Aggies, but I could easily see the Cougars pulling out a win here just because there is a little bit of a talent disparity. Bush's Boca Raton Bowl between the Toledo Rockets and the Louisville Cardinals, and I'm gonna pick Louisville. They've had such an interesting season, started on such a high note, but the last few weeks of the season have been so rough. I think they desperately need a win. Now, don't get me wrong, Toledo's a great team, but they are also losing their head coach as well. And I do think Louisville is just the more talented team. If they didn't have that catastrophic collapse towards the end of the season, we might be talking about them going to the college football playoffs if they were able to make that ACC championship game. I don't think there's much to it here. Cardinals are going to get the win.
Louisville finished the game or the season on a three-game losing streak in the ACC. Last year, Pitt finished the season on a five-game losing streak in the ACC, and they lost to the Toledo Rockets. This year, Toledo's losing their head coach. And I'm not going to change your pick on this one, Connor. I'll let you keep Louisville. But I am taking the Toledo Rockets to do it once again.
I respect it quite honestly. That's actually really funny now that I think about it.
Next up is the New Orleans Bowl with Western Kentucky and Southern Miss. I think this has quite a bit of potential to be a little bit of an underrated game. I really think that Southern Miss was going to have a better season than they did, given they brought most of Marshall's team in and their head coach from last season. Western Kentucky typically has a really solid passing offense, overall very good team. A lot of people are picking Western Kentucky. I think I'm going to hop on board with that one, but I'm not really too swayed in either direction.
Yeah, I'm leaning with Southern Miss just because I do think with all of those Marshall players that there is a good chance that they can put it together. I know Western Kentucky is typically very good, like you mentioned, Jonah, but I think maybe this year is a little bit of a down year for them. I'm gonna personally lean with Southern Miss. This is also assuming that all those Marshall players are in fact playing, considering that the head coach for Southern Miss is currently on his way to Memphis to be their head coach. So that'll be an interesting one too, but I do think Southern Miss might be able to squeak out a win here. The Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl between UNLV and Ohio. Now, both these teams have had their ups and downs. UNLV had a very rough start to the season, nearly losing to an FCS opponent, but overall, I do think that they are the more talented team. Use that transfer portal very well during the offseason. Ohio can give them a bit of a fight, but I do think UNLV overall is just the better team here. They're going to get the win.
Yeah, this one feels like it could be a shootout. I could see it going either way, but I'll go ahead and lean UNLV as well there. Cal and Hawaii. Hawaii's got home field advantage here playing in the Sheraton Hawaii Bowl. Um, I just really like this freshman quarterback Cal's got. He's been so up and down this season, but man, if he has a good game, I think Cal can just absolutely run away with this one. That's what I'm going to bank on here.
I think the defense is the big part of it too. I think Cal does have a slightly better defense than Hawaii, but this is a great story for Hawaii. An 8-4 season, they were in contention in the Mountain West for a little bit. I mean, it'd be a great win for them, but I do think Cal is going to ultimately spoil that for them. The game above Sports Bowl between Central Michigan and Northwestern. What a season for Northwestern. Yes, they barely got into bowl eligibility, but you got a big win over Penn State, turned it around a little bit. They actually played decent against most of their opponents. I'm going to rock with the Wildcats here. Maybe it's a little bit of Illinois State bias from me, but I do think Northwestern has the tools capable to get a bowl win for the first time in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, they're playing Central Michigan. They're like 10.5 point favorites. I think Northwestern wins. I think that they cover. This is not going to be an interesting game to watch. Wildcats win in a blowout. Another Big Ten versus a Group of Five school. This time it's going to be a little bit closer. New Mexico had a great year going 9-3, despite losing Devin Dampier in the transfer portal. And then you look at Minnesota. I honestly think Minnesota, despite only going 7-5, which wasn't quite as good as we thought they were going to do, had a really solid year. They lost a close game to Northwestern, actually, which is one of the reasons that they ended up being a little bit lower than we expected. But hey, that got Northwestern to bowl eligibility. Minnesota still had a good season. I think they're a really solid team, and I've got them beating New Mexico here.
I think they're a really solid team too. But New Mexico is going to be furious. This is a team that, quite frankly, should be playing in the college football playoffs potentially. This is a team that should have been competing for the Mountain West title instead of Boise State and UNLV, but because of how their tiebreakers work, they didn't get the chance to. And I think New Mexico is going to show out in their bowl game and kind of send a message that some things need to change. I'm picking the Lobos in this one, but it wouldn't shock me if Minnesota does manage to get a win here just because Minnesota is still a pretty talented team and just had a couple rough stretches of games, but overall, I do think this is going to be a really interesting game that's going to fly under a lot of people's radars. The Serve Pro First Responders Bowl between FIU and UTSA. I really don't have much to say about this one. UTSA has a very potent passing attack. I'm going to lean with the Roadrunners here. Really could go whichever way you want, but UTSA is favored by 8.5 points. I do think they're going to ultimately get the job done here.
And then there is Pittsburgh. What a disappointing way to end last season. This year, they haven't lost 6 games in a row. So there is some hope that they might actually be able to win a bowl game. A lot of people certainly think they're going to, with 90% picking the Panthers. I think it might be a little bit closer than people. And I think that they need to make right the loss to Toledo from last season. You can't lose to Group of Five schools in your bowl game in back-to-back seasons.
Yep, I'm in agreement here. I do think East Carolina is a very competitive team, but I do think Pitt is just another level above them. Oh boy, here we go. The Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl between Penn State and Clemson. What could
Also
have
known as the
been
Disappointment Bowl.
what could have been a potential national championship game if everything panned out is now a battle between a barely bowl eligible Penn State team and a 7-5 Clemson team. This is going to be such a sad game, but I do think Clemson is going to dog walk Penn State in this one. Uh, Penn State has a great defense, but they still have no quarterback. Drew Aller is still their leading passer on the season with 1,100 passing yards. He hasn't played since the Oregon game. I don't care if both teams have been a disappointment and Penn State still has a good defense. There's been so much turmoil and drama with the head coaching search and everything that's been happening. And Clemson's actually put together a decent end to their season. Obviously, there was that big win over Louisville towards the end of the year. They ended the year on a 4-game win streak with wins over Florida State, Louisville, Furman, and South Carolina. Granted, not many of those teams are very good, but still, 4 wins in a row. You're building a good amount of momentum. I still think Cade Klubnik is a very good quarterback. They have plenty of weapons on both sides of the ball to get the job done. Clemson's going to get the win here.
We'll go ahead and pick Clemson, but personally, I also like the way that Penn State ended the season. They found ways to win games. They also didn't face super high level competition, but they beat Michigan State on the road by 3 scores. They beat Nebraska by 27. And then when it came down to it to get to a bowl game between them or Rutgers, even though it's just Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights had a good season. They had the home field advantage, and Penn State was able to grind out a hard win in order to make it to this point. I think that they're going to find a way to do it and get a win in this bowl game against Clemson. Next up is the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. And Army is favored in this game. However, I love what UConn was able to do this season. They had a great year. Yeah, they're losing their head coach, but I think the team is going to rally behind him for one more game. I love this UConn team, and I think they're going to be able to get to 10 wins this season.
Yeah, it's an offense that can throw the ball and run the ball compared to Army's offense, which is just going to be running the ball. And Army's not as good as they were last year. You also got to keep in mind that UConn arguably has one of the best wide receivers in college football on their team. I think UConn is easily going to get the win in this one and cap off a pretty remarkable season by their standards. Everyone's favorite bowl game, the Pop-Tarts Bowl between Georgia Tech and BYU. Also, what could have been considering that Notre Dame was originally supposed to take the spot for Georgia Tech, but obviously there was that whole fallout. But I still think this is going to be a really interesting game. BYU is going to be mad because they thought they should have been in the college football playoff. Georgia Tech had a relatively disappointing end to their season, too, considering that there was potential that they were going to be the ACC champion, and that ultimately fell through with some bad losses. But both these teams have incredible rosters. It's a little bit different because you got BYU with the true freshman quarterback, but a very solid team around him. And then Georgia Tech, who has Haynes King doing just about everything for them. I think this is going to be a high scoring, really fun game. But BYU is the better team. There's a reason they were in the college football playoff hunt for most of the season. Give me the Cougars to get the win here.
I'm also going BYU in this one. I do really wish it had been Notre Dame and BYU because that would have been a fun game. I think Notre Dame definitely would have won that one. I really think that they were worthy of being in the playoffs, at least talent-wise. Although obviously they lost to Miami head-to-head. I get why the committee did what they did. But when it comes back to this game, BYU just is the better team here. I liked Georgia Tech a lot in the preseason. We had them doing a lot better than most people thought, and they did finish the year ranked, so we're going to go ahead and take some credit on that. But they didn't go quite as far as we thought. I think we had them going 11-1,
Yeah.
but they were close in a lot of those games. So we almost had that one nailed down. But BYU, great season. I think that they should have arguably been in the college football playoff hunt and not gotten, I don't know how to say it exactly, but they should have been in the field before the conference championship game. They had a lot of wins against bowl eligible teams. They deserved it. And I think they're going to show exactly why in this bowl game, blowing out a top 25 team. Miami, Ohio, and Fresno State. That's right. Miami has played 13 games. They made their conference championship at 7-5. That's how bad the MAC was this season. Fresno State in the Mountain West, they're going to run away with this one.
Yeah, no more needs to be said. Fresno State was a very good team throughout the season, very competitive. They should get the win. North Texas and San Diego State in the Isleta New Mexico Bowl. These two teams, I think, are going to be pretty well matched up against each other. Obviously, North Texas was in the playoff hunt. Needed to win that conference championship game and ultimately didn't against Tulane, but very competitive. And then San Diego State, kind of similar to New Mexico, arguably should have been in the Mountain West Conference championship game, but due to those tiebreakers, they did not. This is going to be one that I think a lot of people aren't going to expect to be very competitive. And my pick, I think, is also not in line with many people. I'm actually going with San Diego State in this game. I do think North Texas is a great team, don't get me wrong, but San Diego State, once again, much like New Mexico for my pick, they're going to be angry. They're going to want to end this season on a big win. And I think a win over an 11-2 ranked team is going to be the way to do it.
Yeah, I can see this going either way, really. I do think it's going to be close. And I can see your logic. I do personally have North Texas winning this game, but I can absolutely see a world where after just losing out on the college football playoff, all they had to do was beat Tulane and they couldn't pull it off. They would have been the 11 seed had they got that win. So I could see a world where North Texas does just fall apart and ends up losing another game to San Diego State. But then again, they could go beat San Diego State and prove that they were worthy of being a college football playoff team had they been able to pull it out against Tulane. The Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, Virginia and Missouri. This game, it looks like the betting odds are pretty heavily towards Missouri, about a touchdown for the Tigers, and people are picking Missouri over Virginia quite a bit. I think that Virginia had a solid year. The loss to Duke in the ACC championship looks horrible. Although the only bright thing that might have come out of it is that we might see some fixes to the auto bid system being completely messed up in college football. I do think that Virginia has a really solid team, and I think Missouri's been overrated the whole season. They should not have been ranked as long as they were, out of pure spite and a little bit of logic. I'm taking Virginia to win this game.
You know what's funny, Jonah? I'm doing the exact same thing. And I think the big thing is, even though Missouri has one of the best running backs in the country in Ahmad Hardy, it's the quarterback play for me. No Bo Prabula is going to be the huge difference maker because Chandler Morris has been balling throughout this season for Virginia. I do think Virginia can get a huge win here in their bowl game. And again, cap a pretty remarkable season by their standards. I mean, this is a team that hasn't been very competitive for quite a while. The Kinder's Texas Bowl between LSU and Houston. This could have been a very interesting game, but Garrett Nussmeier is not playing for LSU in this one. And even if he was, quite frankly, I'm still taking Houston here. I think Connor Wegman and this Cougars offense have been on another level this season. Just really shocking a lot of people. I expected Houston to be a bowl eligible team, but just barely get into like that 7 win mark. You're talking about a 9 win ranked Houston team that's been very, very good for the majority of this season. I like Houston in this one to get a win over LSU in what I'm assuming is going to be Lane Kiffin's first game as the Tigers head coach.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be the one coaching this game. He might just be in attendance, but I agree. I like Houston to win this game, mainly due to the fact that Nussmeier's not playing. If he was, probably leaning LSU there. It's really tough to say. Georgia Southern and Appalachian State. This one is going to be, I think, relatively interesting, largely due to the fact that because Notre Dame opted out of a bowl game, they had to go find another team to fill all of the slots that got moved around, and it ended up being Appalachian State who hopped in here. And I think part of the reason that Georgia Southern had to wait a little while to figure out who they were going to be playing, nobody wanted to go into the bowl game. Appalachian State took it. And I think that they're going to end up getting a win in this bowl game because of it. I really like the fact that they decided that they wanted to get together and play one more game, and I think they're going to be able to use that to go get a win.
I respect that too, but I'm leaning with the team that earns their bowl eligibility in Georgia Southern. But to be honest, I really don't care about this game. I mean, that sounds kind of harsh, but I'm not expecting a whole lot of things from either of these teams. We can go with App State, go with the 5-7 team, finishing with 6 wins on the season is perfectly fine with me. The Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl between Coastal Carolina and Louisiana Tech. I'm going to go with Louisiana Tech here because Coastal Carolina is dealing with some head coaching changes as well. I believe Missouri State's head coach is now going to be their head coach for the following season. But Louisiana Tech also did not have a very great season last year and is now in pretty good shape this year, has looked very competitive. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Louisiana Tech has a solid game and or has a solid team, and they'll be able to win that one. Tennessee and Illinois. I think this is going to be a really fun one. Both teams have had good offenses this year. Luke Altmaier, from what I've seen, is going to be playing in this game for Illinois. So yeah, I'm really torn on this one because I also think Tennessee has been overrated all season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if they have a win over a bowl eligible team even.
They
I'm
do
pretty
not.
sure they I'm pretty sure they only beat teams under 500, which means that Illinois is would be their best win on the season. And I don't think they're going to get it. I think the Fighting Illini have had a really solid year, and I think they're going to cap it off with a win over a very overrated Tennessee team in my mind.
We've seen this before. We literally saw this last season. It's Illinois going up against a pretty good SEC team. It was South Carolina last year. It's Tennessee this year. Everyone's counting out Illinois. Fighting Illini are going to find a way to win. Yes, Tennessee's offense is going to be very good, but the biggest thing is that their number one wide receiver in Chris Brazzell is not playing. He's opting out of that bowl game, and that's a huge part of this offense. But they still have a lot of other guys that can get the job done, but I do think Illinois is going to find a way to win this game. USC and TCU in the Valero Alamo Bowl, and this is going to be a high scoring game. I mean, it's going to sound crazy, but I wouldn't be surprised if the final score for this game is like 63-56 or something. These are just going to be guys slinging it left and right. It's going to be Jordan Mayava throwing to Makai Lemon, who just won the Blitnikoff. It's going to be Josh Hoover just slinging it to every single wide receiver he has. No defense will be played in this game whatsoever. It's going to come down to maybe one stop. And I do think USC has the defense to get that stop against Josh Hoover and the Horned Frogs. I like the Trojans here in a very high scoring, very fun game.
Yeah, a lot of people are picking USC in this one, and personally, I'm pretty 50-50 on this one. The only thing that I'm pretty confident in is that it's going to be decided by 7 points. Whoever wins, they're going to win by a touchdown. I would be shocked if there's many field goals at all in this game. And I do think that it's going to be USC, but it really could go either way. The 89 to 11% as far as what people are picking is very misrepresentative of how good this game's going to be. Now, Iowa and Vanderbilt. You have Iowa, who had a really solid season this year, more offense this season than we've seen from Iowa in the past decade combined. And then you look at Vanderbilt, who's completed a miraculous turnaround these past 2 seasons, all led by Diego Pavia, the Heisman finalist. This is going to be a really fun game, I think. A lot of people are leaning towards Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia probably going to be playing a little bit angry, given that I don't think he's going to win the Heisman later tonight. Everybody knows it's going to Fernando Mendoza. And then you look at Iowa, everybody's counting them out, and they've just been able to get some really solid wins this season, fighting in every single game. I think that Iowa's going to ruin it for Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. They're going to finish 10-3. Iowa gets to 9 wins this season.
I really like that pick. I'm personally picking Vanderbilt in this one because, like you said, I do think Diego Pavia is not going to win the Heisman, and then he's just gonna up it to the next level in this game, and Iowa's gonna have some issues. But if you're really looking at it, Iowa is probably the more balanced team because, like you said, we've seen a lot more offense from them this season with Mark Gronowski as their starting quarterback. And their defense has been just as good as we are used to seeing. So maybe that's the difference, having a good defense with that offense. But I think the high explosive play capability of Vandy is going to be what ultimately propels them to a win. But I honestly love this pick. It took so much restraint for me to not pick Iowa in this one because I do think they have a really solid chance in this game. Tony the Tiger's Sun Bowl between a couple of really interesting teams with somewhat similar seasons, I guess, but totally different results. You got Arizona State and Duke. Duke, obviously the ACC champion somehow with an 8-5 record, and then Arizona State missing out on the Big 12 title game after dealing with some injuries. And honestly, this isn't a very difficult decision for me. I'm going with Duke here because obviously Duke is riding the high of that ACC title, but they also have most of their rosters staying in place. No Sam Levitt. They haven't had Sam Levitt for Arizona State. They haven't had him for quite a while because of the injury, but he's also transferring out. My guess is a lot of other guys are going to be sitting out. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Tyson sits out of this game because he's got the NFL draft coming up and he's expected to go in the first round. I just think Duke has so much more going for them in this game that I'm going to pick the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona State looks like they're going to be losing Sam Levitt to the transfer portal. And I mean, the fact that even though what I've seen recently is that Kenny Dillingham's going to get a raise and stay at Arizona State, there is talks of him going to Michigan. There's just a lot of distractions around ASU right now. I think Duke gets the win. Speaking of Michigan, what has happened to this program over the last 2 weeks? I mean, everything seems to be falling apart for them. Texas had a really solid end to the season, and to be quite honest, this Michigan team sucks compared to their 9-3 record. I'm sorry to say it, but they don't have a head coach. Bryce Underwood can barely throw a football. I think the Longhorns win by 40.
I don't know if I'd say they win by 40, but Texas's defense is going to cause a lot of issues. I've even seen some things. They're obviously not like entirely serious. It's more of just for the content. But I've seen some people say that with how much drama and what's gone on in the last 2 weeks, that the smart thing for Michigan to do is to opt out of their bowl game and just focus on finding a head coach and moving forward after such a rough couple of weeks. And honestly, that wouldn't be that bad of an idea considering that they're probably going to get pummeled by the Texas Longhorns. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm with you. Texas is easily going to get the win here. The SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl between Nebraska and Utah. And this is going to be one that I think had possibilities to be pretty interesting, but overall, I think it's going to be pretty cut and dry. Utah is the better team here, considering Nebraska doesn't have Dylan Raiola as their starting quarterback because he had that season-ending injury. Granted, they have one of the best running backs in the Big Ten in Emmett Johnson, but Utah just has so many more weapons, and now they're actually playing for something as well, as their longtime head coach recently announced that he is stepping down. What better way, what better send off than to get a bowl win to cap off an 11-2 season? I think Utah is going to run away with this one.
Yeah, Utah's the better team here, and I think they're going to send off Kyle Whittingham the right way. Once again, we are going to skip past the college football playoff games. That video will be out either later today or tomorrow. Once again, Rice and Texas State. I think this one goes to Texas State. Not really that interested in this game, so I think Texas State's the better team here. They'll get it done.
Agreed. The AutoZone Liberty Bowl between Navy and Cincinnati. Obviously, Navy is playing against Army today, or as of when we are recording this, and we'll see how that outcome uh, ends up determining a couple of things. But I think Navy should end up winning that game. I do think they are quite a bit better than Army. In this game, I think it's actually going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, with the service academies, they typically just run the ball. There's not a lot of passing involved. And sometimes that's difficult for teams to adjust to, and sometimes it's really easy for them to adjust to because it's super one-dimensional. And I think Cincinnati, obviously, really great start to the year and then just started to fall off a little bit. I still think they have quite a lot left in them. I'm taking the Bearcats in this one. I think Brendan Sorsby is a very solid quarterback, and they're going to kind of revert back to the old ways they had at the start of the season. Now, this could change a lot, but I do think Cincinnati is just the better team in this one, and they're going to be able to handle Blake Harvath in this midshipman offense.
Yeah, Cincinnati's on a four-game losing streak right now, but they played Utah, Arizona, BYU, and at TCU. Three of those teams are ranked. One of them is a really solid team they had to go on the road to play. You can't fault them all the way for that. Navy would not have won any of those four games either. I still think, just like Connor said, Cincinnati's the better team here. I like them to get the win over what is probably going to be a 10-2 Navy team. Now, another one of the crowd favorites, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Which head coach is going to get a giant bucket of mayonnaise dumped on his head? Wake Forest or Mississippi State? The odds makers like Mississippi State. I'll give it to them. They had a better year than we certainly thought they were going to. And then you look over at Wake Forest, another team that very much surpassed our expectations. I Now, don't take this as a reason not to watch our preseason predictions because we'll have plenty of those next year. But I think we had Wake Forest going 3-9.
We
And
did
there was
not
a
have
guy
them
in the
going to a bowl
comments.
game.
There was a guy in the comments who told us that we were incredibly wrong and Wake Forest was going to have a great year. And I thought he was crazy. If you're watching this video, congratulations. That was a great prediction. Even though you're a Wake Forest fan, you had to say it.
We
Wake
sincerely
Forest very much
apologize.
surpassed Wake Forest surpassed our expectations by a lot. Everybody's expectations by a lot. And I think they're going to continue doing it. I've got them beating Mississippi State.
I do think it's going to be a pretty interesting game because Mississippi State, like you mentioned, did show some signs early on in the season, and we even had them ranked a couple times earlier on before they started SEC play. But this Wake Forest team is just a little bit more talented. The big contributor on offense is Claiborne, their starting running back, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference in this game for the Demon Deacons. The Trust and Will Holiday Bowl between Arizona and SMU. You want to talk about ending the season on a high note and just rolling through opponents? Look at Arizona. I don't know prior to their last five games, but they are at least on a five-game winning streak with wins over Colorado, Kansas, Cincinnati, Baylor, and that rivalry win over Arizona State. And SMU lost that close one to Cal that ultimately got Duke into the ACC championship game. I think these two teams are going to be a little evenly matched, and it's going to be a pretty interesting game. But Arizona is going to keep riding that wave. They got all the momentum in the world going for them. Give me the Wildcats to end the season with 10 wins.
Yeah, I also have Arizona here. They had a great finish to the season. Honestly, this is exactly what I expected Arizona to do last season. They completely disappointed last year. Fafita, after losing his star wide receiver, Tataroa McMillan, had a much better season. Great turnaround by him, great turnaround by the Arizona Wildcats, and I agree with Connor. They will cap off the season by getting to 10 wins. And that is all of the non-college football playoff bowl games. So that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure to come back and check out our college football playoff predictions in the next day or two.